Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the HR and Administration Committee meeting. It is Wednesday, June 1st, and I'm calling the meeting to order at 9:33 a.m. Good to see everyone, and Pam, would you please call the roll for us?
Thank you. Madam Chair Howery.
Here.
Balducci.
Here.
Regent Wright.
Here.
Regent Ryan.
Here.
Have a quorum.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for being here. So I am looking for a motion to approve the previous HR meeting minutes from May 10th as included in your packet. Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Any changes? Great. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstaining? Great. The minutes passed unanimously. The do I need a motion to approve the agenda? Nope.
So
Okay,
moved.
great. Oh, well, there you go. Thank you. So the item on the agenda, number 3, we are going to go to Mike Lopez for a presentation. So as included in the agenda, or as included in the packet, we have some proposed changes to the management and confidential manual, and Mike's going to brief us on that. And we have seen the revisions, but we'll talk through that and ask any questions. So Mike, I'm going to ask you to please present the changes.
Yes, thank you, Regent Howery. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation for you today. I just wanted to have a brief conversation and follow up on the presentation I had made in May, and just wanted to again review those more substantial material areas of policy revision, and then hopefully leave some additional time for Q&A now that you committee members have seen the details of the proposed changes, and hopefully have had an opportunity to review some of those. I welcome some conversation and some questions following that. And again, to committee members and to Alice's point, we do anticipate some additional editorial changes, certainly nothing material in advance of the June full board meeting. So we'll go ahead and make those minor editorial changes and then provide that final copy so that the committee and the full board understand all of the changes that we're making, sort of with this wholesale review of that policy document. So again, you may recollect the areas that we really sort of honed in on are some revisions to state and federal statute, specifically regarding the Family Medical Leave Act, and for Connecticut state employees, specifically the new Paid Family Medical Leave Act, which I'll review again here in just a moment. We had included some organizational changes in the leadership structure, and that really speaks to the Chapter 5 appointment changes that we are recommending, some technical updates to the document, including some benefit notes that I will drill down on in a bit more detail in a moment. And then again, alignment to just update some of our practices and processes now that we've sort of been, in shared services in the HR environment in particular for the past 2 years. So this gave us a great opportunity to align those practices to what we're managing today. So you may recall again, Chapter 5 spoke to the changes in appointments. We have better defined the system president and the institution president, where the board will appoint the system president, and then the system president will have the authority to appoint the institution presidents. And again, those institution presidents would include Charter Oak State College, the CT state president, and then the 4 CSU university presidents. It also goes into a bit more detail and makes some changes to management confidential interim appointments. And specifically, one of the more material changes is these interim appointments, as you may recollect, those management confidential employees in those interim appointments, if the appointments themselves remain temporary, then they would certainly have the ability to return to their former position, be it another management confidential position, or if in fact they came to us from a bargaining unit. The one interesting change that we're proposing for that, though, is once that interim appointment is actually transitioned to a non-temporary, so a permanent appointment, any return rights to that former position would need to be first negotiated and memorialized in a memo or some documentation that we can have on record, not only for our purposes and the purposes of the incumbent, but for any possible auditing requirements that we may have to address. The other substantial change in that Article 5 for appointments is the Senior Advisor Fellow. And we feel that that's going to be a great opportunity, sort of as an off-boarding opportunity for our senior leaders at the Executive 3 level or higher who have a substantial amount of experience and knowledge of the system and continue to and can continue to provide us, the benefits of that experience. So the system president or the university presidents would have the opportunity to assign an individual, again, at the Executive 3 level or higher, to that Senior Advisor Fellow status, as opposed to, their retirement, their termination, or a non-continuation agreement. So we think it would just be a wonderful opportunity to offboard them and for us to receive that benefit of some strategic thinking on their part. We then moved into the area of Article 7, and that really speaks to many of the benefits that we are offering our management confidential employees, including vacations, holidays, compensatory time off, and a variety of leaves of absences. And we made two material changes here. You may recollect we had a minimum usage of 12 vacation days that managers were required to take within the calendar year. We've since removed that, proposing that language be removed, just to allow the managers to take account of their own leave time depending on their work requirements and those of their supervisors. We are very confident and certainly continue to encourage our managers to take that time off that they have accrued just to recharge their batteries. But we felt that this 12-day mandate needed to be looked at again, and we're considering removing that. The other material piece to this is the compensatory time language. And again, after additional review of the salary levels expressed in the Fair Labor Standards Act and sort of where that ceiling now is established between eligibility and ineligibility for overtime, we've determined that our management confidential positions at the professional 2 level classification and lower, so just professional 2 and professional 1, would now, due to that income threshold, would now be eligible for overtime. They could still draw or benefit from compensatory time if that was the decision of the employee and the supervisor, but they do have the opportunity to now draw overtime in those instances where they are being asked to work more than their 40-hour per week schedule. And then, of course, those managers above professional 2, so professional 3 through executive 5, would still have the opportunity for that compensatory time with the approval of their supervisor. The other item on this particular section, as I had made mention at the top of our conversation, is the Paid Family Medical Leave Act for the state of Connecticut. And this is a fairly substantial policy change to the state's FMLA policy. And it really is going to go, I think, a long way to benefiting management confidential employees who really desire that income replacement if they are on an unpaid leave of absence due to their own illness, perhaps caring for a sick family member or bonding with a child. And also any instances, any unfortunate instances of family violence. They would be able to remain in a paid leave status capacity in those instances as well under this Paid Family Medical Leave Act. The state began drawing deductions for this benefit back in January of 2021. And they actually put this program live for utilization by employees just this past January of 2022. So we think that that's going to be a very nice enhancement to that Family Medical Leave Act benefit for our management confidential employees. And just a note on that Paid Family Medical Leave Act, that is exclusive to non-represented employees. Except in those instances where we may have a bargaining unit who may in fact bargain for that benefit. There is a provision in that statute that speaks to that and allows that. So if one of our bargaining units would in fact like this benefit for their members, they would have the opportunity to bargain that with the state and to offer that benefit to their members, with the deduction starting for that body of employees. So the last area of these material changes speaks to Article 8, and that is the article that addresses our non-continuation notices, issues of discipline and reprimand, suspension and termination. And we just wanted to highlight, particularly regarding the non-continuation notices, of the board's authority to non-continue to CSU president, so the system president, and the exclusive authority of the system president for the non-continuation notices of institutional leaders and management confidential employees here at the system office. And then, of course, that opportunity for those non-continuation notices would be extended to institution presidents for their management confidential direct reports at their institutions. It also, these changes, as you may have seen in your review, they help to clarify the process for discipline and appeals of discipline, and how they in fact speak to the non-continuation notices. So those really are the sort of the three larger areas that we had addressed. There are some nuances outside of those three areas that you may have seen in the changes that we're proposing. Again, I think that speaks largely to the editorial adjustments that Alice had mentioned at the top of the call. But I think the areas that we had just discussed are sort of more of the meat and potatoes, if you will, changes that we wanted to bring to your attention. So that concludes my remarks. I certainly would welcome any questions or further discussion on any of this.
So before we get to questions and discussion, I'd like to take a motion. I'd like to take a motion to move the resolution forward, and I'm looking for that motion. So got Joanne saying so moved, and I've got Richard saying second. Okay, so now we can take discussion. So are there questions you have about the policy for Mike?
You know what I hadn't realized, maybe I'm incorrect, but I see that the community colleges aren't going to be officially, quote unquote, state college until July of next year. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That is correct. Currently, they are remaining, they're separate campuses due to the accreditation requirement currently. And then when we certainly fold that into a singly accredited institute, that's when that change will be memorialized.
I just thought it was earlier than that, Michael, but okay. Okay.
Madam Chair, could I just want to thank Mike and Ernestine for their hard work, and Diane Mazza, who's not on the call, for updating these recommendations, for you today. So it's a lot of work to keep track of all of these little moving parts, and just so appreciate their time and attention to it.
We do definitely appreciate it. It is a worthwhile exercise that goes thankless most of the time, so we appreciate that, and we appreciate the ability to review them, given the big change we have coming up in the next year. Right? It both feels like forever, and it's happening also very fast at the same time because there's a tremendous amount of work that goes into that, and so absolutely appropriate to acknowledge all the people who played a part in that. And there are a lot of changes in this, right? And I know we got to preview them earlier in May, so we knew what was coming, but that did take a tremendous amount of work. So thank you all who worked on it, and thank you, Diane, who is not here also. So,
Yeah.
are
I'm
there
just,
any? Go ahead.
I'm just appreciative. We have this document that we can sort of have as a living document, if you will, because these policies, do change from time to time. So it is nice, and I greatly appreciate the flexibility that the board presents in these policies where, from time to time, we can review and propose changes. So this is going to be, I think, very helpful as we move into our one singly accredited institution. So I greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Okay, are there any other questions about the changes that we would like to that we have on the motion right now before us to adopt these changes? And I will throw out there, as they've said, there may be minor wordsmithing between now and when it gets to the board, but no no substantive changes will be made between what we're seeing here and what goes to the board. So, are there any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed?
Joanne's hand went up.
I saw her hand go up, yes, for the record. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, the motion passes unanimously. Yes, Alice.
Madam Chair, as we wait for our presenters who are coming at 10 o'clock on the dot, maybe perhaps just as an informational piece that Ben and Mike could speak to the anticipated retirements.
Okay.
So I had a filler information item, though it's not on the agenda, but we'll see if we can throw it in there.
We'll roll
I'm
with
happy to
it as
provide.
the next item. Yeah. Isn't here yet.
We've
Go
been
ahead.
pulling together information for our budget presentation, which will be next week. For those of you who care to see it, we'll have some tables about retirements. But today is the first day of retirement for quite a number of former CSU employees, former and maybe in some cases future. But we are anticipating that the system-wide fiscal year retirement number is going to be 750. Of which some 300 and over 300 are between the months of, today and the end of June. So we have, this is quite a lot. Just for when I was 10 years ago at OPM, the annual number of retirements was between 800 and 900, and that had been consistent for since the 2009 early retirement all the way up through 2017 or 18, and now and that included CSCU, UConn, the state of Connecticut, the whole business. Now for CSCU to have 750 just out of our subset of employees is striking. I don't know what the full state number is, but there should be some relaxed-looking former state employees on Connecticut's beaches over the summer because of the large number who've recently left state service. That is something that we're just now trying to grapple with. We're factoring that into our budget presentation. However, it's difficult for us to know. Certainly some of those retirees have already been replaced, the ones who retired earlier in the fiscal year, and many of the ones who are retiring now are actively being replaced because of the critical nature of their position. I know we were working to ensure coverage at a few campuses and their financial aid departments and other things like that, even yesterday. So there are quite a number of people retiring with pretty critical positions. So it's not quite clear what the full savings will be, but we anticipate significant savings there as a result of those, the time it takes to refill, and we hope that we'll be refilling lower in the pay scale. Of course, this comes at a time when the labor market conditions are not ideal for starting people at the bottom of the pay scale. We face competition for a lot of the jobs that we are trying to place people into now.
Will we be replacing all 750, Ben?
I don't believe so. It's difficult to know because the reorganization is happening at the same time. So somebody who leaves in one position, those duties may be replaced in a position in the one college or in the new organization. But I think just immediate direct refills, I think, are happening. I don't know. I would bet 25 or 30% of the positions are being, somebody who's critical and needs to be replaced right away.
We'll also be doing the 120-day for those people that we want to bring back who we haven't had new hires for it. So they'll be retired and they can come back for the extra 120 days, correct?
Yes, I know. I have signed off on quite a number of 120-day jobs for retirees in the system office. Obviously, the ones at the universities and the college don't require my signature, blessedly, and so I'm not quite as familiar with those. But I know that it's pretty common, both to allow for transition, and in a lot of cases because they don't have anybody in mind to fill the duties yet. So we're going through that search process right now.
So you mentioned savings to a degree, and with those 120-day individuals, we don't pay any benefits. So that's a plus for us. And if we had to hire somebody for the interim, if we had to hire somebody and we can't find them.
Oh yeah, and we'll certainly save a lot of money next fiscal year with them. The big cost for the retirements is the payout, which are considerable in the case of long-serving employees. Often $20 or $30 or $50 or $75,000, depending on their length of service and their appetite for vacations over their career. But so in many cases, those payouts are being made now, being paid out of the fiscal 22 budget, but we'll get to appreciate the fact that we're paying 75% of their salary for a limited time period as temporary worker retirees next year. I think it makes a lot of sense. These are folks who add a lot of value and you tend to be highly productive and able to get a lot of work done in that limited schedule. So I think it's a good thing for us, but it does pretty much just give us a little bit more time to solve the problem on a permanent basis, which is a real one. I know our recruitment area continues to be busy with new recruitments, not only from the reorganization, but from the replacing retirees. So a couple of other things just while I have you and while we're waiting for Siegel to come. Mike Lopez has been working very diligently and in a complicated and challenging environment to effectuate all the changes in salaries that were included in the CBAC agreement. So the raises are being paid out in actually over 3 separate pay periods, starting on June 17th, and then a month later in the middle of July, and then again at the end of July. So this is in coordination with the Office of the State Comptroller. This has resulted in us having to shift a bunch of funding and budget from fiscal 22 into fiscal 23 that we had thought was going to be in fiscal 22. But that's all, we seem to have been able to accommodate that. And we are on track to, with only a very few exceptions, get all of those obligations paid in a timely way. Obviously for us, we have adjuncts, which create a lot of complexity. We have to prorate the one-time payments. Prorating adjuncts is a little less simple than you might think, because what a full-time workload is and how do you measure their workload during that period is something that we've had to give a lot of thought to. But that is all moving along smoothly, I think, or at least to the extent that Mike is having complexities and problems with it. He has been solving them without them coming to my attention. So that counts as smooth. I think that it will be, it's going to be dramatic, I think, for a lot of our employees. They're going to see a significant lump sum payment on June 17th, and then adjustments to their base in 2 steps, as well as a final lump sum payment at the end of June. At the end of June, yes. No, at the end of July. That'll actually get paid at the end of July. There's a second lump sum payment along with the annual increment that takes effect on July 1st. So it's I'm happy to note that we're able to meet all those obligations going forward. I think I don't think there are any other significant issues. Obviously, we're continuing to do all of our negotiations about the impact of the reorganization with the bargaining unit. You know, we're making forward progress. It is slow and painful to work through all the many issues. There are lots of situations where, you know, filling the top positions kind of has to be done sequentially before you can be sure which slots are available to our employees. But we seem to be hitting our stride with AFT and 4Cs, and I believe are making some pretty serious progress. And I anticipate having that continue over the summer as we go forward. So has Siegel not joined us? I'm doing my best.
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I had a question. So it sounds like we're not immediately refilling when people retire. We're including that in the whole process of what do we need to do with the reorganization. So we're not filling positions we need to then do something else with. So that's great. Are there any particular campuses or schools that are going to be in trouble or are particularly hard hit with retirement this year that we need to be aware of?
I don't believe so. I do not believe that we are, I mean, it takes time to do these searches. And so there will be some faculty searches for current retirements that won't be concluded until after the faculty come back in the fall. And so there may be some campuses that are a little light on full-time faculty in the fall, just because of the time it takes to move through so many faculty searches. But I don't, we're not currently, you know, underfilling other than just through the time it takes to find the right candidates in those circumstances. There is, I think on the administration side, there is some underfilling that's going on as we wait to see how the movement of administrative staff plays out with respect to the transition from 12 to 1 college.
Right.
So I think that there's some, we're likely to catch up on that more next year once we have a better sense of how that all plays out. To be honest, the way that we budget for staff next year is to budget the people who are here now and then to make some educated guesses about turnover and about you know, what new hiring we'll have to do and what vacancy accruals we will have from the retirements and other transitions. So we'll have more information as we go through the year to know how exactly that's going to play out. But I think it will be, we have a pretty good conceptual handle on how this is all going to work, even if we don't know every single instance yet. But let me, if you don't mind, the Siegel folks are here. If you would like, I can give a quick introduction to that.
That'd be great.
Chairman Howard. The Siegel had been retained by the system to evaluate a significant number of our management confidential positions and to do a market analysis to determine how our pay structure for these positions relates to the market conditions and to do a sort of a reality check on our compensation practices for management confidential employees. This includes some existing positions as well as some newly created positions for the one college. I think that it was a cross section of those positions that should give us a significant level of comfort for our overall compensation patterns for management confidential employees. I think that I'll let them speak to the results, but I find the outcome of this to be encouraging, that it reflects very positively on the rigor and diligence with which we have established compensation at the system office and in the management confidential ranks at the colleges and universities. So I think it is a valuable exercise. I want to commend, again, Mike Lopez for the work that he's been doing throughout his career at CSCU in establishing, dealing with compensation issues and classification issues, but also in support of the Siegel evaluation, which I know he was the primary person to gather and explain all that data to the consultants. But I will turn it over back to you, Chairman Howery, to receive that report from Siegel.
Great, thank you. We're ready to hear your report for us, and you're clear to go ahead.
All right, great. Well, thank you for having us today. My name is Carolyn Cowper. I am joined by my colleague Glenn Alonzo, and we are both officers within the Siegel company and have worked extensively within higher education, both at 4-year and 2-year public and private institutions. So very much pleased to be able to share with you the results today. Alice, do I have sharing capabilities on my side, or would you like to share on your side?
Perfect. Wonderful,
thank you. So really over the past few months, we have worked very closely, as Ben mentioned, with the HR team, Mike Lopez, Jackie Swanson, and also with Bill Grammel as well, to look at a select subset of management confidential positions to determine 2 major objectives: to understand how the CSCU salaries compare with other roles or positions with the similar types of responsibilities, experience and requirements at other either external institutions or organizations. And then secondly, to provide the HR team with market information. So this is base salary information to assist HR and senior leaders to make those salary comparisons and be able then to really have those tools and resources at their disposal going forward with this market data. We did not look at all management confidential positions, really only a subset, as I mentioned. There were 52 positions in total, representing 157 employees. And this was at a certain point in time. I believe the census file we received was in the late April, early May timeframe. And as we looked at the positions, this was across 11 of the classification levels. We did not look at any positions at the executive 5 level. So over these next few slides, what we'll be able to cover with you is a summary of the findings and results stemming from the study, and we'll also cover in detail some of the methodology, approach, and work steps as well. So as we take a look at salaries and how they compare against the external market, we typically use a range around the market. And in this case, we had looked at the market median information of the different external institutions and organizations and had a plus or minus 15% range around that median. And that allows institutions to be able to look within that range to determine where an individual employee should be paid. And where someone should be paid within the range really depends on a variety of factors. That could be anything related to that employee's experience, their expertise in the area, how they are performing in that particular role or position, and as well as the overall scope of and responsibilities of those positions as they compare to that external market. So we're pleased to say that as we looked at the group of 52 positions, we are finding, go back up, thank you. We are finding that about 70% of the incumbents that we looked at fell within the 85 to 115% of the median. So that range that I just mentioned, that's a very good figure to see. However, we did find that a smaller number of employees, about 8%, representing 13 employees, fell below that 85% of the market median, and then another 34 were above that 115%, and that was 34 employees, or a little over 1/5 of the individuals that we looked at. And there may be rationale for why that you have the 13 below 85% and then the 34 above 115. And usually that's based upon incumbent experience, their expertise, potentially how long that employee has been with either the system or the specific institution or campus, how they're performing against the duties and expectations that have been set forth for them, and how they align with the different market information that we received. Overall, though, we do see that this is a very good competitiveness range in terms of the overall results against the external market. And we know that our HR counterparts are looking into those 13 that are below 85% of the market median, as well as the 34, to determine and get more information about why that may be the case. Alice or Ben, anything to add in terms of commentary, in terms of those findings? Okay. So let me dive into our specific methodology and approach. It is fairly comprehensive and detailed, and this was in very close collaboration with our project team and with our HR counterparts. We had received a lot of information to really kick off and start our market assessment. First was, a census file of all the employees, positions, their salary and pay information for those roles that were in scope of our study. And then secondly, we received position description information. Those were in varying formats. Some were more detailed and comprehensive than others, but that was information that we used as a base point for making those external market comparisons. In addition to that, knowing that there are some reorganization changes that are happening that will take place as of, I believe, July 1st, they will go into effect. We also took a look at not just the current org charts, but also the proposed organizational structure charts as well. What we did find as we looked at those 52 positions, they ranged in scope in terms of their overall scope of responsibility, whether or not it was at the system office level, the CSEC system level, for a specific campus, whether or not that was one of the state universities or one of the community colleges, if it was part of Charter Oak State College, or part of the HR Shared Services group. So a lot of different variety of information and understanding in terms of those different markets. Because we looked at the position descriptions, we focused on the actual responsibilities. In some cases, the title did not paint the full picture of what the role was actually doing. And also to note, as we look at the external market, there may be times within the published survey data for the external market where that title is different. It's not the same exact title as you would see at CSEU. So that's why we focus very much so primarily on those responsibilities, and where there was maybe not as much detailed information in the position description or job description that we received, that's where we worked closely with the HR team and our project team to really understand what the role actually does. So that's the first part. The second part then is to look at and identify what are those external resources that we want to use, the published survey information, to be able to do the assessment and have these market comparisons. So we do use published compensation surveys. So there's a difference between a published compensation survey versus a custom study. These surveys are reputable survey publishers who have consistently and repeatedly created and sent out questionnaires to many participant institutions or organizations, have a very thorough process to gather that information, conduct the analysis, and then report out on the data. So all the sources that we used, and there were several sources, 2 of them were higher education specific from the Coupa HR Association. So one is for the administrator survey within Coupa. The second is for professional positions, which are typically exempt level positions. And then the other 2 sources were Pay Factors and Comp Analyst, which are very large, comprehensive databases that provide us with information, both from a higher education standpoint, but also from a broader general industry standpoint. So we are very pleased to be able to use these sources, which have been vetted by our Siegel team and are very consistently used by other organizations and institutions. The next step then is we have both pieces now. We have the CSCU information, we have the published market information. Now let's kind of dig into the details and be able to pull the appropriate data. And this is where steps 3 through 5 come into play. So with step 3, we are really looking at ensuring that we have the right scope cut, so the right labor markets for each of the positions, taking into account, if you remember, I just briefly mentioned earlier that some of the positions may be at the system office level or an individual campus level. So we wanted to make those specific distinctions as we pulled the data from each one of those surveys. So as we looked at the labor markets, we looked at the scope of the institution, where they were located, the types of institutions in that group. And then specifically for the HR shared services positions, the admin assistant and the executive assistant roles, we had matched to data that was both higher education and general industry, because from a recruitment or labor market standpoint, for those roles and specifically, you may be recruiting from outside of your more traditional higher education institution. As I mentioned earlier, we really looked at the position responsibilities. So as we reviewed the CSCU position description or job description, we also viewed and reviewed the information, that similar type of information that comes out of the published survey sources. We were then able to collect market information at the 25th, 50th, and 75th percentiles for each role that we priced. So that will allow us to get a good representation of the base salaries in the external market. We do recommend using that market median point as that reference point, as I alluded to earlier, and we looked at a range around that market median. And there may be cases, and we saw this, where positions may be paid above that market median point, below that, based upon some of those individual factors that I mentioned earlier. If we can go to the next page. Also, as we looked at the data, we took into consideration geographic adjustments and aging of both the market information and adjustments to some of the CSCU salaries. As we looked at what we call the cost of labor or cost of living, and there's a difference between those 2 terms. Cost of labor really is about the difference in salaries from one location to another, versus cost of living, which is sort of the difference in the market basket of goods from one location to another. Both are very much related to one another, but they are different in terms of how they are defined. We do look at both, but focus a little bit more on the cost of labor versus cost of living. And in our review of all the different locations for all the different institutions within CSCU, we were able to look at that by various salary levels. And we found that there was a bit of a differential against the overall US national average. And we found that differential to be 10% above the US national average to account for the cost of labor, cost of living in the Connecticut area. We applied that geographic differential, and also we applied another adjustment to the survey data. So as you can imagine, not all published surveys have the same collection period of where they're gathering information and when that information is effective. So all the sources that I mentioned earlier, from Coupa, from PayFactors, from Comp Analyst, they all have different starting points in terms of their effective dates. So we wanted to make sure that based upon when that data was collected and released, it takes into account the timing from when that was collected. Typically, it was in the 2021 timeframe or the early part of 2022. And as we're looking at this study, the information needs to be effective as of roughly July 2022. So we made those aging adjustments to the market data as well to account for that time difference. Lastly, then, on the CSCU side, we had incorporated a 4.5% increase to the management confidential employee salaries that are retroactive for fiscal year 2022. So making all those adjustments, taking all of the other work steps that I mentioned, taking all that together allows us to run those pay comparisons in step 7. And we looked at each individual employee at the most granular level against the market. And we also took a look at, especially for some of the roles that were multi-incumbent, or meaning more than one employee was in that role, we looked at on a broad role basis as well. And then again, by the classification level. So all in all, that is our methodology as we have conducted this assessment. We have provided our project team and our HR counterparts with a very detailed tool to see all this information that will allow them to continue to make and use that going forward as they look to make any pay decisions, salary decisions. So let me just pause there. Any initial questions, comments from the group, or Allison, Ben, Glenn, anything that you'd like to add?
So I'll throw out there. Thank you so much. That is a very thorough explanation of the methodology used, and it's good to see that we information we needed. And so I think it's all very impressive, and I'm glad that that tool is now available to our administration to be able to make adjustments as needed throughout the process. So does anybody else have any questions that they'd like to ask?
I did. I thought it was a wonderful explanation, very detailed, it was comprehensive, and not exactly what I would say totally easy to understand, because all the nuances that were involved in that and looking at it quickly over the top. But as I was looking at it, I looked at the 13 individuals that were below level, and all of them may have some reasons for not receiving the increases, correct? And then there may be a good portion of them that should receive the increase, at least to bring them up to the median level. And I also saw that we had quite a few 34 people above, which is so we don't have to worry about them, and the rest that fall in between. So we're really looking at, Carolyn, if I understand this correctly, at 13 individuals that we want to make whole, if that is where they have to be. Am I correct in that?
That's absolutely right. And I think that's where the HR team will need to do a deeper dive. Likely we'll need to meet with those employees, their manager or their that functional leader of that area, to gather information to understand exactly what you're describing. What are some of those individual factors that may be more qualitative in nature and not necessarily quantitative information, to determine, yes, whether or not they should be adjusted to the 85% of the median as a start. and then discussions on maybe do they need to be paid further within that range would be the second piece of that. For the individuals that are above that 115, we are not recommending at all that their salaries or pay be reduced. That's not sort of in the culture of these types of studies. However, it's an important data point for the HR team in particular to have. If, for example, if that role were to be restructured, at some point in the future, if an individual were to leave that role, it gives them the opportunity then to have that market information and work with the functional leader, work with leaders, other leaders, to determine then, does the role need to be changed, and or does the pay need to be changed going forward? But really for the 34, it's just for your information and just other data for future decisions. But for the 13 that are below the market, those are the ones that we would focus on first. And then we would also recommend that for that 70%, the majority of the employees that fall within the range, that doesn't mean that they are appropriately paid within the range. This is also an opportunity for the HR team now to dive into some of those individual factors to see, well, if someone is at, exactly at the 85% of the median, well, should that individual be paid further within a range given their individual factors, expertise, experience, and so forth. So there's still, I would say, more work to be done internally, but this is really the first step, the first foundational piece that will allow the HR to do that.
Carolyn, thank you for that. And I want to thank Michael, you too, for your efforts and your work. I think you both did a wonderful job in your explanation and in the detailing of this. And it certainly made, I think, my job a little bit easier, or at least I better understand the direction we're supposed to be heading and what we're trying to do. So thank you both for that. Thank you. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions or comments at this point?
Chairwoman Howery, if I could just make a brief comment, I just wanted to again thank Carolyn for a wonderful presentation, and to Carolyn and Glenn and their team, their expertise was just superb, and they just brought so much to the table. Siegel has such rich and deep experience, and their help was truly beneficial. And it really will go a long way, particularly as Carolyn had mentioned, this tool that she had mentioned at the end of the discussion. It's really going to provide us, some great utility in the months and years ahead. So I'm excited to have that sort of in our back pocket as we look to analyze not only the positions and the employees at the individual level, but also the overall classification system for our non-represented management confidential employees. So my sincere thanks to Carolyn. And she had told me if we have some more work, she was so excited to do this. It's pro bono going forward.
Always glad to hear that. Always glad to hear.
Yeah, so
thank you.
I truly appreciate the work, and this really will be beneficial to our system.
That's awesome, and it's a really key time, right, to be looking at these.
Absolutely.
That we're competitive in the marketplace, and to understand what we're doing, but it looks like we now have the tools to be able to see where we're maybe not in line and where we are in line, and how that relates to individual employees. So I'm very glad to see this information and the tools to be able to make smarter choices going forward. So I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much. And thank you to all the people who I know must have provided you a mountain of data on our site as well to be able to get this done. So thank you all.
Great. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Take care. That was the last item that we have on our agenda for today. Are there any other, is there any other business that needs to be brought forward before the committee today?
Chairwoman Howery, if I could just make one quick comment. I just want to bring us back to Ben's comments regarding the retirements. I would be remiss if I didn't just take just a quick moment to thank my team for the processing of this mountain of retirements. I actually, and this I think speaks at great length to what I think is one of the really wonderful benefits of our transition to shared services, and that is the ability to use expertise across program lines, if you will. And we really saw the benefit with these retirement processings, these hundreds, literally hundreds and hundreds of retirements between January and through this coming July were processed by only four individuals on my team. And, just to quickly explain the process, they have to take each employee and do what's called a service credit audit, and to look at the specific number of years, months, and days of service time for these employees. And unfortunately, much of this cannot be done electronically. They actually have to root through personnel records and review paper documents. And to my team, we just certainly could not have done it. And this team of 4 were responsible for system office, all 12 community college campuses, Charter Oak State College, and CT State. And I just want to shout out to them. It was led by Carla Desjardins, my benefits and retirement specialist, and then 3 other team members on my team. And I'm just truly appreciative of the work.
Great. Thank you so much for that. And thank you to everyone. I can't even imagine how much work it is. And then to hear that you're going through a systematic process to decide what needs to be backfilled and how to do that in conjunction with the other changes that are going on right now. I can only imagine how much work is ahead of you this summer, to your whole team. And thank you all for approaching it so thoughtfully, right? So that at the end of this process, we get to where we need to be. So thank you for everyone who is involved in that. And hearing no other business before, I
Move we adjourn?
thank you. And a second from Joanne. I appreciate everyone's time today. Thank you so much. We will see you at the board meeting in a few weeks, and after that, we'll see you in the fall. And I really appreciate everyone's time and diligence to this committee. Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye.
Live stream's ended.